And the fact is that when I started to look, and Osho suggested this, to look and experience whether there's any moments where you are in a state where the mind is not so active. And I remember the first one I remembered, I was 19 years old and there was an automobile accident. I slid on ice, trying to move aside from a car that was going the other way. And next thing I know is I put my foot on the brake and the car is just sliding, not so fast, maybe 20 miles an hour, into a parked car up ahead. It took a year to get to the parked car.
Yeah.
The silence was deafening. And I knew that the hands were wrapped around the steering wheel, but they were irrelevant because there was no way to steer the car. And at that moment, it took me a while to recognize what had happened, that the mind basically looked at the whole situation and says, can't figure this one out, bye, sucker. And it disappeared for what probably was 15 or 20 seconds, but what felt like an eternity. And then boom, hit the car. And the mind says, I know what to do with this one. Oh my God, my mother's car. I was 19 driving her car. The insurance, what am I going to do? Blah, 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 blah. And then later I remembered when I was 6 years old, looking up at the sky. And we lived at that time in Annapolis, Maryland, which was a very small city, population 10,000, capital of the state, but very small, very, very rural in many ways. And very few lights, and I could see a billion stars. And I was lying on the ground with a friend of mine. We were both looking up. And all I could do was, wow. Wow. And that was the second time when the mind looked up at all of these stars. I mean, billions of them everywhere. The whole black sky coated with them. And the mind recognized that couldn't figure it out. Bye. Later in life, I started having other experiences that were somewhat similar to that and began to recognize that there were cracks in this container called the mind where these experiences, what was beyond the mind, could filter in and did. And then Osho gave meditations, and dynamic was the one for me, that there was an experience in it, that there was something beyond the mind. There was this silence, this stillness, this peacefulness, this utter relaxation. So what I want to suggest is that Osho has been teaching again and again and again two things. Be as aware as you possibly can and watch. He talks about watching. He said it several thousand times over the years, that there is an ability for us because of that crack that I referred to, where watching is available. To start by watching the mind first because it's the easiest. Watching the body first because it's the easiest. And once you have the ability to watch the body, then it's much easier to watch the mind. But until that watchfulness starts to happen, there's so much identification with the mind as who I am that it's virtually impossible to get beyond that experience. Do dynamic, when the stop comes, there's a moment of possibly being in that experience. Possibly. I don't even want to say that it's there. It's always there. That's what I understand and what I experience. It's always there. It's just that the mind comes in and blocks the ability to be there. That's all. So it is tremendously arduous on one level, and it's incredibly simple and easy on another level. And that's really the strangeness of this path of being on this planet Earth, finding our way back home. And that's what I would say I take away from Osho, if I could say it in 5 minutes as I just did.
Yeah, so beautifully said. And those are the teachings that you share all the time too. And I've heard you say that all the time. We are not the mind. I've I've seeked counsel with you when I was going through hard times, and that was the reminder you always gave me. And it's like you said, it's so simple but so profound.